The wind had a mean streak that evening, dry, cold, and restless. It howled across Whispering Creek Ranch like it was searching for something it had lost. Martha Delaney stood by the corral fence, her gloved hands gripping the splintered rail, watching the last of the sunlight burn itself out behind the mountains. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin. The horses were uneasy, tails swishing, nostrils flaring. They felt the storm before she did. The sky darkened fast, the kind of gray that swallowed sound. Martha moved quick, tying the barn doors shut, her breath visible in the cooling air. Her body ached the way it always did after a long day's work, the way 58 years of living in the West makes a woman's bones remember every winter, every heartbreak, every loss. The wind screamed harder, pulling at her shawl, rattling the loose shutters of the ranch house. One of the barn hinges gave a metallic cry. She rushed to secure it. The storm didn't wait for anyone. But when she reached for the latch, the old beam cracked and swung toward her. The world tilted. She barely stumbled back in time as it crashed to the ground, sending a cloud of dust and splinters into the air. Heart pounding, Martha pressed her back to the barn wall. Alone again, nearly crushed by her own stubbornness. "Damn fool woman," she muttered under her breath. When it was finally quiet, she looked out over the land, wide, empty, unforgiving. Once she'd called it beautiful. Now it just looked tired, same as her. The wind softened, whispering through the sagebrush, carrying an echo she couldn't name. Something was coming. She could feel it in her chest, like thunder waiting on the horizon. Morning came slow, as if the sun itself was tired of rising over Martha Delaney's land. The storm had passed, leaving behind damp earth and a silence so heavy it pressed against the windows. She sat at the kitchen table with her coffee, steam curling upward, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The house creaked in small, familiar ways, the kind of company she'd grown used to. She reached for the tin box beside the stove, the one filled with old letters, bills, and bits of her life she hadn't been brave enough to throw away. Her late husband Samuel's handwriting caught her eye, looping, steady, patient. A letter she'd never opened, dated the spring before he died. For a long moment she just stared at it. Then with trembling fingers she tore the seal. "If you're reading this, Mar, it means I ain't coming back from the drive. I don't want you to live quiet. Don't turn to stone waiting for ghosts. If you ever feel the wind calling, don't be afraid to answer. It might not be me, but maybe someone sent to remind you how to live again." The words blurred through her tears. She closed the letter carefully, set it on the table, and stared at the empty chair across from her. "I already lived once, Sam," she whispered. "Didn't think I had it in me twice." The wind outside picked up, rustling the curtains like a soft, familiar breath. She folded the letter, fed it to the fire, and watched the paper curl into ash. But long after the flames died, the words stayed, echoing in her mind like footsteps on the far side of a canyon. Something, or someone, was coming. 3 days passed before Martha rode into Salida. The sun hung low, fierce and red over the plains, painting long shadows across the dry road. The town buzzed with its usual rhythm, wagons creaking, boots clacking on boardwalks, someone tuning a fiddle in the distance. She tied her horse outside the general store, her back straight and face unreadable, the way a woman learns to be after years of small-town eyes following her. Inside, the bell over the door jingled, and the smell of dust, coffee, and saddle soap filled the air. She gathered flour, salt, and lamp oil, nodding politely at the storekeeper, Mr. Harlan, who never failed to talk more than needed. "Had a drifter in here 2 nights ago. he said, folding her sack of goods. Tall young fella. Didn't say much. Bought tobacco and a new pair of gloves. Martha wasn't listening until she saw it. A wide-brimmed hat resting on the counter, dusty and travel-worn. Initials burned into the leather. L.M. Whose hat? She asked quietly. His, Harlan shrugged. Said he'd come back for it. Guess he forgot. She brushed her fingers along the brim, rough, sun-scorched, warm still from someone's life. The faintest smell of sage and smoke lingered. She didn't know why it made her uneasy. Maybe it was the way the hat looked like it had a story, like it belonged to someone who didn't stay anywhere long. She left the store with more than supplies. She left with a question. Outside, a dust devil twisted across the street, catching the hat's scent in the air. The wind tugged at her shawl, the same whisper she'd heard that night on the ranch. Something was closer now. If you're still watching at this point, I know you're hooked. Go to the comments, rate this story out of 10, and tell us your favorite part so far. Smash that like button and let us know. Now, let's continue. The saloon was half empty that evening, the air thick with pipe smoke and the sweet bite of whiskey. Piano notes drifted lazily through the haze, played by hands too tired to care. Martha sat in her usual corner with Clara Belle Summers, her oldest friend and sometimes her sharpest critic. They shared a bottle, not for joy, but for habit. Clara Belle fanned herself with an old newspaper. You keep riding out there alone, one day you won't come back. That ranch has got ghosts, Mar. You ought to sell it and come stay in town. Martha smiled thinly, swirling her glass. Town's got more ghosts than my land ever will. They just dress better. Clara chuckled, then leaned closer, her voice dropping low. Folks been talkin'. Said a stranger's been seen near your property. Tall, young, rides a black horse. Someone said he camped by Whispering Creek 2 nights ago. Martha's hand stilled around her drink. She tried to play it off, but the words sank deep. Probably some drifter, she said. They come and go. Clara shrugged, eyes sharp. Maybe. Just don't mistake danger for destiny, Martha Delaney. You hear? Outside, thunder grumbled far off. That long rolling kind that comes before the land remembers what rain feels like. Martha finished her drink, tossed a coin on the table, and stood. Destiny don't bother with women my age, she said softly, half to herself. But as she stepped into the dark street, the wind shifted. The same dry whisper from her ranch, carrying the scent of sage and smoke again. Somewhere out beyond town, a lone horse neighed, and Martha paused, staring toward the hills. The night suddenly felt too alive to be empty. By the time Martha left Salida, the storm clouds had swallowed half the sky. The air was heavy and restless, thick with that metallic scent that always came before rain. Her mare, Daisy, tossed her head uneasily as they crossed the open ridge back toward Whispering Creek Ranch. Easy, girl, Martha murmured, patting the horse's neck. But her voice didn't sound steady, not to her own ears. The first crack of thunder split the distance, echoing off the mountains. Lightning flashed, pale and brief, lighting up the wide stretch of prairie below. For an instant, Martha saw something. A shape, still and watching on the far hill. Too tall for a coyote, too silent for a man. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. The wind began to howl, carrying bits of sand and sage. Daisy snorted and quickened her pace. Martha kept her eyes forward, but her pulse thudded in her throat. The closer she came to the ranch, the heavier the sense grew, that she wasn't returning alone. When she reached her front gate, she pulled the horse to a stop. There, half hidden by the storm's shadow, stood a horse she didn't recognize. Black, restless, muscles rippling under the flashes of lightning. No rider in sight. Martha dismounted slowly, rain beginning to fall in thick, cold drops. "Hello?" she called out, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind. No answer. The horse whinnied once, stamped the ground, and turned toward the ridge, as if waiting for someone who wasn't there. Then it bolted, vanishing into the darkness. Martha stood in the rain, heart hammering. The wind whistled through the broken fence, whispering a name she didn't know yet. L.M. The storm broke before dawn. What it left behind was ruin, branches torn loose, mud thick as syrup, and the fence line snapped in 3 places. Martha rose before sunrise, wrapped in her old wool coat, and went out to inspect the damage. The world was slick and shining, every blade of grass jeweled with rain. She moved along the pasture, boots sinking into the soft earth. When she reached the north fence, she stopped. The post nearest the creek was splintered clean through, as if something heavy had hit it. Nearby, hoof prints, deep, powerful, not from any of her horses. She crouched, touched the edge of one, tracing the outline. The mud was still fresh. Something glittered beside the fence. She leaned closer. A glove, leather, worn, the kind a man might use for roping. She turned it over in her hand. The initials were carved faintly into the inside cuff. L.M. Her breath caught. The same letters as the hat in town. The same feeling rising up her spine like a warning and a promise, both. She looked around. The pasture stretched empty, silent except for the creek's low murmur. Still, she felt it again, that pull in the wind, like she was being watched. Martha straightened, slipped the glove into her coat pocket, and stared toward the hills. "If you're out there," she whispered, "you best come show yourself proper." The wind sighed through the wet grass in reply, carrying the faint scent of tobacco and campfire smoke. When she turned back toward the house, a single word seemed to echo on the breeze. Faint, almost imagined. Soon. The sun was high when Martha finally saddled Daisy and headed toward Salida. The storm had left the land raw and shining, puddles scattered like mirrors across the prairie. She rode with the glove tucked inside her coat, the leather warm from her body, the initials pressed against her heart like a question that wouldn't rest. The ride to town took nearly 2 hours, but her thoughts made it feel longer. Every time the wind brushed her cheek, she imagined footsteps behind her. Every crow's call felt like someone's warning. By the time she reached the main road, her nerves were tight as a barbed wire fence. Sheriff Tom Greeley was sitting outside his office, boots on the rail, hat tipped low. He looked up when she dismounted. "Martha Delaney," he drawled. "Ain't often you ride in unannounced. Trouble?" "Maybe," she said, handing him the glove. "Found this on my fence line. Don't belong to me." He turned it over in his weathered hands, squinting at the initials. L.M., huh. We had a young drifter pass through a week ago. Quiet sort. Texas horseman. Took a few odd jobs up by Pike's Crossing. Martha's pulse jumped. "He give you any trouble?" "Nah," the sheriff said. "Polite, paid his tab. Folks said he's heading north, maybe your way." He gave her a look she didn't like. "You expecting company, Martha?" She met his eyes. "Not the kind that leaves gloves behind." Tom chuckled softly. "Still, keep your rifle close. Not all strays are worth taking in." She tipped her hat, mounted up, and turned back toward Whispering Creek. Behind her, the sheriff watched her ride out, the glove still faintly smelling of smoke and wild sage. And far on the horizon, a dark figure on horseback watched her too. The afternoon was gold and quiet when Martha rode back to Whispering Creek. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, leaving the land sharp and shining under the sun. She was bone-tired, mind heavy with questions that had no answers. But as she reached the gate, her heart stopped. Someone was there. A man stood by her corral, sleeves rolled up, mending the broken gate like he'd been born to do it. Tall, broad-shouldered, sunburnt from the trail. His horse, a black stallion, grazed nearby, reins looped loosely around a post. He turned as she dismounted, and the sunlight hit his face. Young, maybe late 20s, with eyes the color of distant rain. Calm eyes. Kind eyes. "Ma'am?" he said, voice low, respectful. "Hope you don't mind. Your latch was busted. Figured I'd fix it before it got dark." Martha's mouth went dry. "You trespass often, mister?" He smiled, just a little. "Only when fences ask for help." She studied him. Dust on his boots, rope coiled over his shoulder, a harmonica tied to his saddle, and on his right hand, one glove missing. Her pulse quickened. "You lose something?" she asked, pulling the glove from her coat pocket. His brows lifted, surprised. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured, stepping closer. "Didn't think I'd see that again." "Name's Luke McCrae." The air between them seemed to hum, a silence thick enough to touch. "Luke McCrae," she repeated, the name tasting strange on her tongue. "You fix fences for every widow in the territory?" He met her gaze, steady, unflinching. "Only the ones who look like they've been holding the world up too long." Martha swallowed hard, the wind stilling around them. Something inside her, quiet for years, began to stir. If you're enjoying this story right now, subscribe, and don't forget to give this video a like. Dusk settled like smoke over Whispering Creek. The sky bled from gold to violet, and the chill of night crept in behind it. Martha lit the oil lamp in the kitchen, its soft glow spilling across the wooden floorboards. Outside, Luke finished stacking the last of the fence rails, the rhythm of his hammering slowing as the stars began to bloom overhead. When he came to the porch, she was waiting with a cup of coffee. "You've done enough for one day," she said, handing it to him. "Strom took more than boards out there. Whole sections near ruined." He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers. Just an instant, but enough. "Wouldn't feel right leaving a job half done," he replied, eyes catching the lamplight. She studied him. How young he looked, and yet how tired, how steady. It made her uneasy, the way his quiet filled the spaces her loneliness had worn hollow. "You can bed your horse in the barn," she said, turning away. "Spare blankets inside if you need." "Much obliged, ma'am." Later, when the house had gone still, Martha sat by the fire, pretending to read. Through the window she saw him, a dark silhouette against the lantern glow of the barn. He raised a harmonica to his lips, and the music came soft and low, melancholy, beautiful, like the wind remembering an old tune. She closed her eyes, heart tightening. "Don't be foolish," she told herself. "You're too old for this kind of fluttering." Yet when thunder grumbled far off and the melody drifted through the walls, she caught herself listening. Every note warming something inside her she'd sworn was long gone. Outside, the storm was moving closer. Inside, Another kind of storm was already waiting. The wind rose with a vengeance that night. By the time Luke came knocking on her door, rain was pelting the windows sideways, thunder rolling over the hills like cannon fire. Martha had just stoked the fire when she heard it, one solid knock, then another. She opened the door, and there he was, soaked through, hat in hand, shirt clinging to his chest. His eyes caught the firelight and held it. "Fence post came loose again," he said over the roar of the rain. "Can't fix it till morning. Your barn door won't hold in this wind. Mind if I wait it out here?" She hesitated. Every sensible voice in her head screamed no. But the look in his eyes wasn't wild or reckless. It was honest. Human. "Come in," she said finally. He stepped inside, bringing the smell of wet earth and horse with him. She handed him a towel, her hands brushing his again. And for a heartbeat, neither moved. The fire popped, the rain hammered harder, and the world shrank to the space between them. "Reckon it's been a long while since I sat warm by a real fire," he murmured. Martha turned away, staring into the flames. "You make a habit of showing up at lonely women's doors, Mr. McCrae?" He chuckled softly. "No, ma'am. Guess I just found the right one this time." Her breath caught. The words landed deeper than they should have. She tried to reply, but thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to shake the lamps. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire hissed, the storm raged, and something older than reason flickered in both their hearts. Something neither dared to name yet. When Martha woke, the world was silver. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean and still. A faint mist curled off the hills, and the air smelled of wet cedar and smoke. She found Luke already outside, splitting kindling near the porch. His shirt clung damply to his shoulders, hair mussed from the rain. He looked up when she stepped out, coffee in hand. "Morning, ma'am," he said with that easy half-smile. "Your barn's still standing. Guess I did something right." She handed him a mug. "Guess you did." They stood there in the soft light, the silence comfortable, almost peaceful. But peace made Martha nervous. It had been too long since she'd felt it. Too long since someone had stood on her porch like they belonged there. "You plan on heading north?" she asked. "Was thinking on it," he said, setting the axe aside. "But..." He glanced toward the hills, then back at her. "Can't say I've seen a sunrise hit land quite like this before." Her heart skipped, though she hid it behind a sip of coffee. "Sunrises don't last, Mr. McCrae. They always fade." He met her eyes. "Maybe. But they're worth watching while they do." She didn't answer. Couldn't. The air between them was too heavy with everything she'd stopped allowing herself to feel. From down the road, Clara Bell's wagon rolled into view. Martha's breath hitched. If Clara saw him here... "Luke," she said quickly, "you best take the back path, round the barn. Folks around here don't take kindly to company they don't understand." He hesitated, searching her face. Then he nodded slowly. "Whatever you say, ma'am." As he disappeared into the mist, she felt the ache of something both new and far too familiar. The fear of losing something she'd only just found. By the end of the week, the town had found its new story. Someone saw the young cowboy leaving her land at sunrise. Someone else swore they heard laughter from her porch. By evening, the whispers were everywhere. Martha Delaney's gone foolish over a boy half her age. Clara Bell showed up the next morning, eyes full of pity and judgment both. "You've worked too hard to be made a fool of, Mar," she said, setting her gloves on the table. "You think a man like that stays? They never do." Martha stared out the window at the hills. "Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but I'm tired of letting other folks decide what I'm too old for." Clara's lips pressed tight. "You'll regret it." Martha turned to her, voice quiet but sure. "I already regret all the times I didn't take a chance when my heart begged me to." That night, when the sun melted into amber across the plains, Martha found Luke by the corral, packing his saddle. He looked up when she came, eyes uncertain. "Didn't figure I'd be welcome here much longer," he said softly. She stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint scent of leather and sage. "You're a grown man, Luke McCrae. You can go anywhere you please. But if you're leaving because of talk," she paused, voice trembling, "then let 'em talk. They've been talking all my life." He smiled, that same gentle half-smile that had undone her from the start. "You sure about this, Martha Delaney?" She took his hand, fingers trembling but steady. "No," she whispered, "but I'm too old to keep saying no to what might make me feel alive again." The wind shifted, warm and wild. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured. Not a storm this time, just a promise. And when the night settled over Whispering Creek, the young cowboy stayed. Come spring, the talk in Salida faded. Folks found new stories, as they always do. But sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the fields turned gold, travelers swore they saw them. The woman with silver in her hair, and the young cowboy riding beside her, easy in the saddle, laughter rolling like thunder across the hills. No one could say for sure if they were ever married, or if love just made its own vows out there by the creek. But the fence stayed mended, the lights in her house burned every night, and when the wind blew east, carrying the scent of sage and rain, it seemed to whisper her words, soft, defiant, and full of life. "I'm too old for this," she'd said once. But the truth was, she wasn't. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.